controversial. So I'll start a queue of people that sort of have hands up here. So the New Zealander who should be called on first. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, Anders 7. Okay.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Roy. Just a small point about the crypto-fatalist Lewis. His response has always struck me as bizarre, because it seems to me like things are much worse in his system than that indicates. It sort of gives you the impression that you're still able to determine what's actual, but of course you can't, because you're stuck, world-bound. You're just in this one world. You can't be a member of any other world.
Yes.
So you can't, no more than you can determine that this point is going to be somewhere else. This point can't be somewhere else. And the actual world can't fail to be the world of which you're a part.
Yeah, so they really should be, that objection seems completely compelling to me. And it's just that I'm so psyched out by Lewis, thinking, wow.
How could he
So what I really should have is like a comma at best, something or something, but probably more doubtful yet, because the way you present it is just the right way. That it makes it's like a pseudo causation kind of makes it like you're doing a lot more. There's a kind of a slipperiness in it where it looks like he's getting some ersatz version of what you wanted.
That's right.
Couldn't get by with, and he's probably not getting that even. And that would, and for my purposes, since I want that gestalt where he's just this crypto fatalist.
He's a sort of a crypto super fatalist.
Whoa, that's the new version. Yeah. Okay.
So what do you think about this view? I might think that it's a presupposition of ethical discourse that there are multiple alternatives. Maybe because the point of ethical discourse is we have to decide, we need principles for deciding among the different alternatives, and so the logical fatalist is rejecting the presupposition of the whole ethical discourse, and then they reject the presupposition. Can you then go on to say what ethical views follow from that?
If you have, so depends on how you're using presupposition here. So I was thinking, so I like classical logic, so I don't really have much room for semantic presupposition where I'm going to have these things lose their truth values in this dramatic Straussian way by having a false presupposition. There can be pragmatic presuppositions of various sorts, and those are okay by me. So if it meant something, you're going to have to depart from your classical logic in order to get that criticism in there, then I don't want to do it that way. It is, it sort of kicks out your liberation part of it, where it seems incredible in a kind of deep way, that insofar as I think of myself as in any practical situation, I think I have real alternatives. That I'm not just, it isn't like math, really. It is, and I'm sympathetic to that. So, but it could be that, we're just sort of doomed to make that error. So I am willing to attribute other kind of tragic errors when I have a controversial view on vagueness. I'm an epistemicist. I think there should be sharp thresholds. And I also think that we're just built to not believe that. That it's just, and if you're a good speaker of the language, you should be very reluctant to accept that view. And so you're built to fail. So maybe that would be another kind of way. You're built to fail on this. But on the bright side, you are in the ideal world. So it's good for Deionic logic. I think that's you're there.
Yeah, thanks so much for the great talk. I was wondering. So let's just stick to the moral realm first.
Yeah.
With the fatalist. So I'm not aphitol. So for the fatalist, that it's possible that I be aphitol is necessarily false.
Yes.
So that's not possible.
Yeah.
It's also not possible that I be both aphitol and nonphytol.
Right.
For the logical fatalist. But nonetheless, there's an interesting difference between one proposition and the other.
Yeah.
That it's possible that I be aphitol and that I be possible that I be 8 and 9 feet tall. Right?
Yeah.
it's not going to be about in the business of truth, right? That distinction, or even necessary truth, is going to be some other interesting distinction. How does it go? Who knows? But it seems that we need to, in order to explain the difference between possibility and impossibility, we need to have other resources. So I'm wondering if in the deontic domain we'll have to have the same kind of thing. So it is not suppose that I neither pet nor torture a puppy.
Yes.
And there's a difference between it turned out to be impermissible in both cases that I pet the puppy and that I torture the puppy. But there's an interesting normative difference between them.
Yeah.
It's not going to be cashed out in terms of, again, possible truth or what there is, but there's going to be other resources that we need to implement to this. So I'm just wondering if this whole style of reasoning just pushes the interesting questions one level away. The possibility and possibility distinction, the permissibility, impermissibility distinction. We're just going to have to make sense of those kind of questions with different resources because the interesting issue is still there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I'm not sure I'm going to actually be answering your question the right way, because what I started to do is start thinking about what I thought people would be answering, what I thought you were doing.
Yeah.
So and that started to just cloud out,
Okay.
stuff that you started to say as you went on, stressing the moral part of it. So one of the things was clear. Well, in what way is this logic? So the way I'm picturing it is, you start out with classical logic being first order predicate logic with identity, and then it's like Susan Hampton, she's talking about deviant logics and supplemental logics. What you can do is start to add in new words to be your logical words. And then, well, that's just sort of a decision you make about how do you expand your vocabulary. You want to capture more of these inferences that go along. So deontic logic means, now I've thrown in perdition in there, and I'm treating that as a logical word. So I thought, one of your points about the 8 feet tall versus the contradictory thing, I thought your pointing out was that with some of the cases I can get the inconsistency just on the first order predicate logic. I can get it easy.
8 and 9 feet tall is not contradictory.
No, I mean,
Right.
8, I thought the other one was, maybe I'm mishearing you. I thought it was like 8 and not 8. Sorry. So I misheard you then.
Right.
So anyway, I'm shaping you along into the objection I wanted to hear.
Of course, yeah. That's the way to proceed in talk. Yeah.
So in this, in the phantom question, I wanted to be able to answer that question about how I was picturing logic.
Right. All right.
It's a little tight because I was really worried about people saying, well, what about this derivation claim that you're doing without premises? It's all the inference rule. And so I need to have, I was sorry about that. That's where I thought it was going.
Yeah.
And then I just stopped hearing you after a while.
Can I retry when
Yeah,
I
go
have
ahead.
time? So it seems that, it's possible that I be 8 feet tall. It's possible that I be 8 and 9 feet tall. That's neither of them is contradictory.
Yeah.
They're both. One of them, if we don't collapse modality, we think it's possible. The other is impossible. If we collapse modality, they'll both be impossible. But nonetheless, there's an interesting sense in which there's something interesting about the claim that I could have been 8 feet tall, even if it's false. That is not about the claim that I could have been both 8 and 9 feet tall, even if it is false as well. So it seems that the interesting question about what distinguishes plausibility from necessity, plausibility and actuality, is at that level, at the level of making that distinction. And so is there going to be a logical or modal distinction for the logical fields, but the distinction will still be there.
Yeah, so I still may be hearing it the wrong way. So I was still saying, so is the point that, there are different ways I can establish an impossibility. Sometimes I have to use quite a bit of resources to get it to the impossibility. Sometimes I can do it with very few assumptions. Right. And then you have this kind of feeling, well, if you have very few assumptions, well, that's kind of sort of more impossible than the other one, in which I had to kind of huff and puff and had all these other things I could throw in, this other vocabulary I could throw in there. Right. And then you might be tempted to grade, but I don't want any kind of grading, that it's possible, it's just a uniform thing. And it's just how the derivation was going. So all that matters to get the Hithaka theorem, condemning stuff is just that it'd be impossible.
I don't know Hithaka's theorem, but I take it the system he works in only has one accessibility relation.
I don't know, he never published what he's doing.
Oh, so we don't-
All it is, so you have people reconstructing, yeah, so it's just all, yeah, it's pretty much at the level I'm talking, which is.
Well, it seems to me that intuitively it's coherent to suppose that there's only one possible, in the sense of metaphysically possible world, while there's a range of permissible worlds which may not include the one metaphysically possible world. So suppose I think that morality is determined by some rules carved into some stone tablets.
Yes.
So that when I say that something's permissible, I mean it's consistent with those rules.
Yes.
So that gives me an accessibility relation of moral permissibility.
Uh-huh.
And if possible worlds are just sets of propositions, then there are lots of different maximal sets of propositions consistent with those rules. But on the metaphysical side, which is where the fatalist is, okay, if you insist there's only one metaphysically possible world, the accessibility relation simply loops back to that world, but that's a different accessibility relation. And so now I've got a fatalist who can say, no, this world is awful. So it's not the least demanding morality.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer the, I haven't thought it through as, so I didn't think of your 10 commandments kind of maneuver, so I don't have an answer, sorry. That's okay.
All right, I'm also going to question the idea of fatalism as the least demanding morality. I think I can imagine even less demanding morality.
Okay.
A less demanding morality is one in which I have a whole array of choices and I'm free to choose among them, and they're all supererogatory. Or maybe, if you think it's conceptually necessary for supererogation, one of them is merely permissible, but it's really, really, really hard to do that one. So that's incompatible with fatalism, because I've got these choices.
Yeah.
But it also seems to me that it's less demanding than what you suggest. It's the least demanding theory.
So they're all supererogatory. They're all above and beyond the call of duty.
Like maybe if I really, really, really worked hard, I could do a merely permissible thing.
So it isn't. Doesn't so? Is your idea is like it's more of an? I was thinking like it's like a big achievement to have threaded the needle and gotten just the right thing done, and all the other things were horrible. The picture you're having is. I mean, I'm doing it. It's supererogatory. I didn't even have to do it, and I did it. So I get your intuition. So I have to think whether I can make it.
So I get for the most demanding morality, you want to maybe build in that there's only one unique right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know why the least
Right.
demanding counterpart of that
Right.
needs that this to be the only unique thing to do.
So the difficulty I'm having so one of the things that's I guess maybe suspicious in my view now is I may be using like a contrast to show how what makes it the least demanding is this kind of contrast effect that since it was all these horrible things I could have done sort of on the night this feeling as a pseudo feeling of being on the knife's edge of doing something terrible. It could have been terribly wrong. Whereas, and sort of making you feel, boy, he really navigated us through just the right, as you would have been shipwrecked. But that is really taking advantage of just how horrible you're making the alternatives. And is that legitimate in making a judgment about it being the least demanding in the sense that, oh, well, guaranteed to get through and to accomplish this great feat. And so if you have this other feeling of like all the praise that goes with the supererogatory act, sort of picturing it.
I don't know that supererogatory needs to, well, depends on how you define it, but I think if the duty is really, really, really low and really easily exceeded, it wouldn't necessarily deserve praise for doing a supererogatory action.
Oh, really?
It's defined, different people define it differently, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I agree you have entered a good competitor, and that I have to see if I can knock it down to win the prize. And I didn't think that, I thought my two conditions were running independently, and I'm just wondering, well, maybe I'm gonna have to use like the other guy in there to get the contrast going or something like that. So I'd rather not. I was hoping that you would use, oh, there's a definite description over there, there's a definite description over there, and bingo, they pick out the same thing. It would be not as good, I think, if I had to use the other definite description to get the, yeah, that's a good objection. So you're on a roll. Here's the, now,
So
they're
this
good.
was, yeah, so Alistair, and then Andrew, and then Bob. And sorry, I just stepped out for just a second there.
Oh, okay.
You know your numbers.
Alistair, Andrew, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Roy.
And if you can't, woe to you.
I have two questions. First,
Alistair will still be talking when I get back.
I think I can report him to the University for harassment. He bases it on me being utilitarian. So, your Arthur Pryor argument, you seem to be saying with, you seem to be approvingly saying, that's what you say in the paper that you sent us, this is also enough to refute non-cognitivism if normative statements can be deduced from factual statements, then some normative statements have truth value.
Yes.
But the same argument, I mean, we're talking about non-cognitivism about morality, because there's non-cognitivism can come in different domains.
Yes.
So the argument is, tea drinking is common in England, therefore tea drinking is common in England, or all New Zealanders ought to be shot. Tea drinking is not common in England, therefore all New Zealanders ought to be shot. Valid deduction, okay, unsound, fair enough, but valid. So we've deduced a normative statement from factual statements, therefore some normative statements have truth values, but it doesn't seem, I mean, can I do it this way? Tea drinking is common in England, therefore either tea drinking is common in England or how the heck are you? Tea drinking is not common in England, therefore how the heck are you? So I've deduced an interrogative statement. So has this refuted non-cognitivism about interrogative statements too? I mean, I have a couple of suggestions as to what should be said, but it'll mean that Pryor's, so-called wonderful takedown of hair, and I'm not a non-cognitivist, but you don't take down hair this easily. This is too trivial.
Oh, well, I like trivial takedowns. That they can be, so I'm open for a trivial, so, I mean, he's charming me by his obituary point, I think, but I also thought, yeah, that, I mean, there's going to be this longer argument whether that worked.
Mm-hmm.
Just as I think there's a very short argument for the necessity of identity that Russell dismissed as like, it can't be that simple. And essentially Kripke is just sort of assuming it is and just sort of just acting as it is and just getting you eventually, yeah, I guess it was that simple.
Well, can I suggest why it doesn't work then?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so why it doesn't work is when you, I mean, the principle that A, from A you can get, either A or B, is only truth preserving if B is truth act. Right. And so it simply begs the question. So, if all statements are truth act, if all statements are truth act, then it's truth preserving. If they're not, then it's not. And so that's what's at stake. So the argument doesn't work.
Yeah, that is more alarming to be question begging. But question begging is kind of a vague sort of thing. So that, I mean, the Charles Pigden's point, I think, is that given that, so you might just be saying you don't really get the derivation at all. You're not really doing it in, I mean, you're,
well, does the derivation work for, well, go back to my first, does the derivation work for interrogatives? Does this refute non-cognitivism about interrogatives? Have I shown that some interrogatives, how the heck are you, have truth value?
No, that hasn't worked, right?
So it hasn't worked, so why would it work for an ought statement? Unless we already committed to the view that all statements have truth values, in which case we're already committed to the rejection of non-cognitivism.
It's a tricky, what do I get to assume? So Pigden is, he's sort of writing in this context, given that you didn't have to have it being a momentous ought statement in order to be the counterexample. Mm-hmm. And that is it'll depend, I guess, on how the state of the dialectic is going. At which stage do you want to resist the prior thing? I think that, so you're saying that they just don't accept even as a trivial derivation.
Yeah.
So Pigden is, once, I guess he's just taken for granted, and I was taken for granted. It's a trivial derivation, but it's ethically trivial, but still could be metaethically trivial. I mean, metaethically significant.
Okay, I'll save my second question in case there's time later.
Okay.
So, Andrew?
Yeah. I just have a point of logic and then a question about what the consequences of it are. So at one point you said that since ought implies can, the contrapositive of that is if impossible, then oughtn't.
Okay. It isn't quite. Okay, go ahead.
Is that close enough?
No, it's a different kind of. I was just trying to get it by contraposition. That Hindegard's theorem requires different. You need a different. If it was just contraposition, then we could have just gotten that from Kant.
Right.
So it's a different derivation. We're not using contraposition.
Okay, well then I'm worried that contraposition maybe conflicts with Hindegard's theorem, which is that.
Well, that'd be terrible. Yeah.
So if ought implies can, then impossibility doesn't imply cannot. It doesn't imply ought not. It implies not ought. Right?
Yeah. Right.
Which isn't the same as ought.
That's correct. That's why the contraposition won't get you there to the Hindegard theorem.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
why you need this other stuff, like a closure of permission, that if I'm permitted to do something,
Okay.
then I'm permitted to a lot of consequences. So you need a few other things to get you.
That was a clarificatory question for me.
Thank you. Good, thanks.
So we've got Bob and then Cheryl, and then does anyone else want to get into the queue? Then Chris and Michael?
So my reaction to the lesson from fatalism is that we need to, that it's helpful to think about ethics in more epistemicized terms. And I think I can illustrate that by going back to your earlier, the most hackneyed example of two people drowning. And it's a sort of a familiar thought that you get different results depending on how much information you allow yourself. If you just allow yourself all the information about their futures and progeny and all of that, you get one kind of answer. An answer that may yield very weird kinds of results as to what you should do. Maybe you should let them both drown. But of course, that's not the way we think about these things. We do it from a sort of a context of the information we have. And it seems like your results about fatalism depend on the first sort of non-epistemicized point of view. And I say, well, but really we want the second sort of point of view, and so we need to consider what the situation would be for fatalism given the information we have. Where I'm thinking, for starters, one piece of information is just that whether or not fatalism is true, we don't know. So we wouldn't act on that basis under any circumstances.
Let's see. We certainly don't know. It's false that we don't know. So you're having, these people are, they're ambitious about what they think they can figure out. There is just this one possible world. But they're trying to do all the, they don't really, I guess they are trying to skip they would be skipping all the epistemic stuff, they don't need it because the whole thing is falling out without introducing any epistemic modality at all. Right? That's the
right. Certainly, they're not making claims about epistemic modality.
Right.
I got that. Yeah.
So the picture you're giving, even like in math, trying to understand what we're doing in math, you're thinking about possibilities all the time, investigating the thing, but they can't be these metaphysical possibilities. They have to be epistemic possibilities of some sort.
Yeah, it's almost like you're saying, look, math's the easiest, the easiest science
Yeah.
of them all.
Right.
And I'm saying, no, it's not. It's
Right.
really hard.
Yeah. Well, that is but that is sort of the spirit. There's a little bit of that to math, because you do the math, and then you kind of, when you're done with it, of course, you feel embarrassed to think it could have been different. So you have there's this kind of, or getting all upset about or something seems to be vulnerable to, but it's necessary, and so the Stoics are picturing us as all being imperfect, and that, I'm not the sage, he's not, we're all imperfect, and we're all, but if we really were perfect, it'd be like the math, just sort of, that'd be the right attitude. You would just have no emotion, the kind of reaction we would have. You think of A.J. Ayer kind of making fun of us for being worried about the meaning of life. You know, he says, oh, but you know, it doesn't make any sense for their, you know, and so to pine away that there isn't any meaning of life is just howling for the moon. You know, that's his picture, and you know, I don't agree with that. I think that you can be rationally disappointed over things, even if they turned out. But it is hard to make that coherent, that rational disappointment. But you're right. I think that that's the way we really deal with it. I think it's very epistemicized.
Sure.
My question was about your account of demandiness.
Yes.
And when I think of demanding morality, I think of, or I guess a critique of morality being too demanding. I think of like Susan Wolf's argument where, you know, her critique is that moralities that are really demanding are problematic because they require you to like subordinate all of your interests for the interests of others. And I
Yes.
didn't see anything like that under your account of morality. So I'm wondering why you didn't include it, and if you were to include it, do you think that then that would make your claim that fatalism is the most demanding morality?
Well, I think you do have to subordinate everything to doing what you actually do under this view. So it may have been you have to throw your children to the volcano and stuff like that. If that's actually what you did, but you had to do it.
But so it's only demanding that for particular people then, because if you have, I guess if you're fated to pursue a life where you're only pursuing your self-interest, it wouldn't be demanding for those sorts of individuals?
I guess I mean, maybe there will be generalizations that you'll be able to form, but if you look at the particular cases, so you won't get any, I guess you probably don't get any general principle that, oh, you must toss children to volcanoes, or you must sacrifice, you have to write the big fat check to Oxfam, you know, or wherever the right check. But if you do write a big fat check to Oxfam and you bankrupt yourself and so on, well, you had to. So it does have that aspect. It has a crushing kind of aspect as well. You know, I mean, there are many ways that people use the demandingness stuff, but I was thinking they kind of funnel into the feasibility of the ethics. So, with this, the spirit of this fatalism stuff is, oh, relax and so on, which is very different from the idea I'm demanding too much from people. But I'm thinking, what was the kind of, I was looking for some kind of sufficient condition for both of my definite descriptions. I'm not sure I got it yet, but because that would be the easiest thing, because I was hoping to skip a lot of stuff of what do you mean by the most demanding, if I could find a sufficient condition to do it. And it looked like I had like these big cannons of how powerful they were, and they would be good enough to, that's what I was hoping for.
I've got Chris, and then Michael, and then
Thanks. I don't know if this is going to come out right. Hinteka's theorem says the impossible is forbidden, and
yes.
That's because if we were permitted to do the impossible, we'd be allowed to do anything that follows from that,
Yep.
which is everything.
Yes.
But what if there are impossible states of affairs that aren't contradictory? So they wouldn't imply everything. So yeah, so maybe it's forbidden to square the circle because that would be contradictory. But maybe it's not contradictory to bring about an object that is red and green all over.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd be maybe the argument against doing the impossible wouldn't work for those states of affairs. So one question I have is like, what do you think of that? And the other one is, if fatalism is only is a synthetic truth, then it might mean that my acting differently than I in fact act, if that view is true, is merely possible but not contradictory.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel like that might impact the lessons you want to draw from fatalism.
Yeah, I think they might. So I wasn't thinking of the color compatibility point, which is a good point. I was thinking I'm just going to start adding in these logical words but it doesn't. It's harder to get the impossibility off of, for color compatibility stuff, and all the other stuff that's going to go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea, well, just put a lot of logical words into your system. You're probably not going to get enough logical words in there to get all the possibilities you want. So then you have this other kind of picture where you somehow there is just this, you are surveying all the possible worlds there are, and that's enough of everything else being impossible. So when you're doing modal logic, you're sort of feeling, well, I've got this stock of possible, I don't have to actually, in my premises, just have any possible worlds. I just sort of have the space set out, and then I kind of reason from there. And then it doesn't seem as bad to get, maybe I get the color compatibility point won't be as worrisome. So it isn't so, so part of the difficulty, I guess, is the idea of deriving impossibilities. You're not deriving the color compatibility in the way so you might be able to get the other stuff. And so by impossible, do you mean derived impossibility? But then you don't have color compatibility. Or is that I just kind of take for granted this modal space? And then maybe I get it. And I'm just giving you, the hopeful alternative and the less hopeful alternative that you think is, I guess, is the more likely one.
Okay. Okay.
Michael? Yeah, I certainly find myself agreeing with Charles Pigden, and was amused by his description of Hare as a post-1960 pet philosopher. But I'm not convinced, because let me try to put it a different way. One starting point is that there can't be relations between things that don't have a truth value, so there's logical imperatives. So if you make it the case that P, and make it the case that if P then Q, and that seems to me to entail make it the case that Q. Or to get a mixed example, if you have an imperative, close everything that can be closed. The window can be closed. Close the window seems to be the fault. Okay, right? So, so the idea is that when you move from tea drinking is common in England to either tea drinking is common in England or I know was you should do something naughty with every Australian, right? It seems to me you can accept that, but say on the other hand that the disjunction has no truth value, and so it's neither an is proposition, nor is it an imperative, right? So I mean, it seems it's going to alteration of, either the statement is either a not statement or it's an is statement, and I want to say that it's neither, and that you can say that and still have the interrelations going from the first to the second, then from the second to tea drinking is not common to do naughty things with all Australians.
There's a similar strategy by Gillian Russell, a former colleague of mine, and Greg Restall, where they invent a third category, and they also put it into, they have a kind of bigger context, because actually Hume has a bunch of these theses. You're not supposed to be able to derive, a will from a was, and you're not supposed to be able to get an is from a seems, so he's systematically got a whole bunch of them, and their thought was that you don't want to wreck all of them. So, and they do work out, so it looks like you can defend most of those barrier theses, although I think they had special problems with the is-ought thing. So anyway, the strategy, I think, Pickens is right, he has a big ethnology, he's an opinionated guy. So maybe I'm sort of too charmed in letting him narrow what I thought the dialect had amounted to. So Alistair's, your objections may be worthwhile, but I should have to work in a better way to get that quote in without cheering so heartily.
Jessica?
So my points are related actually to Cheryl's question. So I'm trying to get a better grip on what you mean by demandingness, and also what's your notion of the moral ought. So one, I guess one intuition is there's morality when there is a kind of a difference between the way the world is and the way it ought to be. And if there is no such difference, if there's just the way the world is, then there's no morality. There are things happening, and that's what it is. So it's the sense in which natural laws are said to not be real laws. They're just descriptive things, and they don't have any normative force. They just say what happens. So that's one thing. And then the other sort of related thing is, I mean, I could imagine different kinds of worlds. So I could imagine a world in which fatalism is true, and every agent that has free will is very bad and selfish.
Yes.
And they all just pursue their interests. They don't care about anyone else.
Yes.
That doesn't really strike me as a very morally demanding world, because, hey, look, all these morally bad things from our point of view morally bad, not, I don't know in that world, from our point of view morally bad, they would be bound to happen, and so far as I can tell on your sense of ought, they ought to happen. Now, possibly, if we imagine the world in which people were extremely altruistic, you know, like a very, very extreme version of altruism, maybe that would be a very demanding world, because all these things that we consider supererogatory would suddenly become kind of a matter of course. They would be bound to happen. It would, and the supererogation would sort of lose its force. There would be no such thing, right? They would just have to do these altruistic things. But that would depend on the character traits of the agents that live in the fatalistic world. So some fatalistic worlds would be very demanding in that sense of in some way.
Yeah. So I agree. There's like this comical element in what I had that I'm not delivering sort of with the. So what I have is this one factor going very strongly that everything other than the actual is forbidden and terrible.
Yeah.
I got that part, and you have to do exactly what you're. So, but there's other, I'm not conforming to other kind of stereotypes about what an ideal world would look like. So I also want, this is an ideal world too. So it's. And you know, this is the ideal world, and welcome to it. It seems like now it's gotten to be pretty much a technicality on how we're using ideal. I guess part of the thing, so I guess what I need to be spending is more time is to run down kind of these rival conceptions of demandingness as being, well, why do we care about whether people are altruistic or they have or they're kind or something? Well, because you want to get to the a better possible scenario. It's some sort of improvement idea, and once you take that off the table, then that's all just sort of pointless. That you don't worry about that part. It has this. So people are kind of picking up. Oh, you're kind of just knocking the knees out from beneath morality, really, not just creating such a wonderful world.
That might be true if you were already in this world, but like, suppose you're God and you're creating a world.
Yes.
It seems like it would make sense to create a world in which there are good people rather than one in which people are bad, right?
Well, if I was God, I think that I wouldn't worry about. I just make the best. I don't care. They don't have to do anything. That's what I think. I'm God. I can just make it best, and what does it matter what their character traits are? I'm in charge.
I wouldn't put you in charge.
Okay. I just deliver the best thing. It doesn't really matter because the whole point of worrying about whether people are nice because they make a difference. That's what would make a difference. Sort of. If they don't make it, if it doesn't make any difference, then who cares? I just deliver what's the optimal thing.
well, they do make a difference. I mean, the world in which people are bad and they're fated to do as they do would be different. We would have different features from the world in which people are good and they're fated to do as they do. You know, one would be some kind of utopia and one would be a real dystopia.
Well, you're getting, I think you're getting, your God is more generous in how much power he's letting others have than my God. So my God is like Brandwardine, where if you have any power, that's taking power away from God. You want to have all the power where it belongs, which is God. So God, to be free, that you cannot have any freedom,
now
really.
Now I'm starting to think you're dangerous.
Yeah, I do. I kind of readily empathize with these kind of brutal characters, I guess. But that's the, you just sort of have to, in following out that perspective, you have to kind of leave aside your regular kind of decent thoughts and just follow out that picture. And without this nostalgia for these traits, which are only useful in different circumstances. And I think people are pretty ruthless in dropping traits that are no longer producing good consequences. They're pretty adaptable. So it looks like they are tracking. They want stuff that makes a difference. So what was kind of virtues in the past? They're just become the monkish virtues that we just can make fun of. That we don't give them. And so it's just hard to adapt. So it just seems so incredible, the fatalism part. But if you, so I think that's so I suspect that's the lingering problem we're having. It's just how can you absorbing that is difficult.
Justin? Okay, so we take logical fatalism and the antithesis theorem, we get action thereby right. You doing an act makes it right. And that's clearly false.
Yeah.
So the question is, which of the two do you reject? And so I'm curious which of the two you reject. And then more generally, what do you think about the idea that our conclusions in practical philosophy, like moral philosophy, for example, could have overturning more powerful implications for questions of theoretical philosophy and metaphysics?
So I think I've given you good reasons not to be a fatalist. That I use, and I'm happy with like Adams using morality to criticize modal metaphysics. So with its evidence, everything is evidence. So I've not. So the idea I've been divided. So it couldn't be the case. So a lot of people don't like it actually. The idea that I'll use my moral views to figure out how the world is. That's backwards or something. Or that's isolated. So I have, So I'm happy to use the Adams stuff and and also this. I think it's just it's just it's horrific the implications of the do. And so and I also find that instructive. I like that effect. Maybe that should be my fifth point. I should say that. Go ahead, use your morality to judge your metaphysics, and it's you throw, and that you're irrational not to. That you're throwing away evidence. That's my view. I'm not sure that answers the whole thing.
No, that's it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. It's only a couple minutes left.
Just a small point about modal ontology. So, saying that there's only one possible world is not strictly speaking equivalent to saying that every truth is necessary, right? And that every necessary truth is true.
So just repeat what you said again.
So I'm just trying to tease apart two theses. There's only one possible world.
Yes.
And what's normally called necessarianism, which is the thesis that every truth is a necessary truth.
Yeah.
And it seems that what gets us into trouble is necessarianism in the way that is defined, not that there's just one possible world, right? So this is just the question. Was it that terminological, just like fixing when we mean that there's one possible world, we're just meaning, or we said that there's just one possible world, we're meaning that every truth is necessary. Is that what you were?
Well, we're getting it a certain way. So we're just saying, I guess maybe that's okay, but it's just maybe there's no difference. Okay, all right. I'm not sure. I'm just getting it. I'm saying it's all necessary truth, but that's because there's only one possible world. That's the idea.
Well, I mean, so take the time case, right? Yeah. So suppose that there's only one time, the present. That is compatible with there being 10 truths about the past. So it is, you know, it was a case of blah blah blah, even though that there were magnitudes and there's not. Right. Similarly, in the modal case, you might say there's only one possible world. That's usually called actualism. Yeah. And that's consistent with it being true that it's possible that, you know, some actually false claim be true. So there seem to be two different theses. One of them is really modal collapse immediately. The other one requires a little more work.
I was thinking in a simplified way. Maybe I'm not supposed to think that I have. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, there can be conceptions of what a proposition are that can also create problems. Anyway, there may be more complicated. I agree. So the one I was thinking about was just the simple Simon thing, and then I hadn't, you know, the time stuff never occurred to me.
All right.
So I'll start.
This actually connects slightly with Justin's point. Okay. It goes back to the David Lewis stuff, the modal realism. Yeah. First, it strikes me as somewhat, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but somewhat strange that Lewis's defense against someone like Adams or Markella's point should be that there's no causal connection between the different worlds, given that Lewis has the paradigm case of counterfactual account of causation. You would have thought that, of course, there'll be causal connections between possible worlds, given Lewis's account of causation. But in connecting with that, the doing allowing distinction. Yeah. Right. So I mean, you're right. Some people think of the doing allowing distinction as tied to causation. Some people don't. And I think the more general.
Oh, I didn't realize the second group. Okay. Yeah. Good. Well, that'd be better for me.
Well, right. No, I mean, right. The doing allowing distinction, in fact, in its more general form, certainly this is the way that Bennett describes it. It's independent of theories of causation, precisely because. Some theories, you know, there are counterfactual theorists and there are non-counterfactual theorists, and you're going to get really different results if you tie it to causation. But then, so if you have the more general account, and then you take something like, you know, this observation that, well, if you think it's worse to do bad things than to allow bad things to happen, then, you know, there's a drowning child in a pond, you should let it drown, because if you save it, what you're doing is actually causing a child in another world to drown. Right. Well, why can't we take that as yet another argument against the doing allowing distinction? We say, well, look, the doing allowing distinction, I mean, it shouldn't depend on whether Lewis's mode of realism is true, but if it, I mean, if on Lewis's mode of realism we get this absurd conclusion that we have to let the child drown, obviously we don't have to let the child drown. Yeah. So, wouldn't it be better just to say, okay, here's yet another in like the 1,000,001th argument against the doing allowing distinction. I mean, the moral significance.
Right. So you sort of have good news and bad news for me. Is that it wasn't so tied up to the cause. Because that's in the Bennett book on the act.
On the act itself. That's right.
So I ought to go because it's. It makes sort of.
He calls it positive and negative relevance, and he doesn't tie it to causation.
Okay.
Right, so doing allowing distinction is about being positively or negatively relevant, and that relevance it's neutral as to whether it's a causal relevance or not.
Okay, well that's a lot better because I wanted that Schopenhauer thing to kind of twist the knife, but I was having a lot of trouble with causation. And on the other idea of the utilitarian kind of idea, well, it's just the act of omission stuff. It's another reason that I think you're right that you could just treat it that way, but. Dialectically, I find it much more congenial to actually continue to drive it, since there's so much, they were all buying the act of omission.
And you don't have to be utilitarian to reject that.
Yeah, I agree.
We have somebody who claims not to be utilitarian who rejects it.
Oh, good. Well,
emphasis on claims.
Right. The pioneering rejection, I guess, utilitarian thinking about it. That's good. That's good news. I just had thought abstractly about the way that that Lewis struggles in his counterfactual analysis of causation. That I didn't see. It seems like he teeters on having to allowing sort of like quasi-causation stuff. I mean, he's very clever in gerrymandering things so he can avoid effects, but the spirit of the thing would. That's good. That's mostly good news for me.
On that note, we'll go ahead and thank our speaker. quick announcement. So there's a reception over in the center. I'm not sure if it's set up yet, but it's starting around 5. And then if I could have a few volunteers, there's another event coming in here in a few minutes. And I was going to say we're obligated to put the room back the way it was. I guess maybe if we go through that, maybe we're not obligated. But just, I don't want to take any chances. There's a couple people. Just
There are no chances.